welcome to the Tire Side Gathering. I'm your host, Zane the Bearded One, with a special guest, the one and only RCR driver, champion, right, if I'm correct?
Defending champion,
that's right, and Bristol winner.
Yeah, I know, right?
Tyler Reddick. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Just really excited to be getting to Darlington this weekend.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, throwback weekend, a lot of excitement going into that race, so it's always a really fun race. And if not to make it even any more throwback, we got to drive there. So, we fly pretty much everywhere we go. We're cruising on down to Darlington here in a few days.
Road trip to Darlington?
Absolutely, every time. Just don't speed on the way.
Yeah.
Cops are sitting waiting for everyone that's going down to a car show that's down there that following week, and everyone that's going to Darlington.
Wow, I didn't know you drove to Darlington. That's kind of cool. Do you do it every year, or is it just...
Well, you have to. I don't think there's anywhere to fly into.
Oh, I've never been to Darlington, so...
Yeah, everyone drives. They don't fly in there for whatever particular reason.
Yeah.
But I think they're just because there's a lot of swampland and not a lot of airports.
Can I go with you on a road trip? Let's go. I'll put gas in the car.
All right.
There we go.
Good.
I got $50 in gas. I got it. So you won Bristol. Road America. We're not going to talk about it because a little bit of movie magic. We're not going to tell the folks what's going on. But Road America.
No,
He won. He won Road America.
If I win, it's the work.
God,
we
I
can
feel
put
going
it
to
in
punch
there.
me in the face if we're wrong on that. But Bristol, man, you had the win of the year, I would say, to pull that off, right? I would say, just from a fan's point of view, it felt rough, and then two cars hit the outside wall, and then you pull yourself into victory lane. How did it feel in the car for you at that moment? Like here we are a couple weeks later, but that sensation of like, hey, they're wrecking, you got this.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
From missing out on qualifying just due to just some issues we were having with our car to try and get it through tech.
Yeah.
And then from there, missing qualifying, starting a lap down, my car chief Cam getting ejected, to just kind of messing with the flow of how our normal pit stops go, who pulled the tear off, everything. It was just everyone's a little bit on edge. I wasn't. I'm not going to lie, my crew chief Randall Burnett was a little worried about it, but got that early caution, and from there, chaos ensued all night long, and we just through attrition, was able to get back to the front a few times and hold on.
Yeah. And I guess my next question is, my crew chief was a little, on edge. Were you the voice of reason in that team for that weekend? It was like, guys, I got to drive this car. Trust me, we got this. I'll get us to the front. Or was it a mixture of everyone kind of come together? Okay, we're in a bad situation, but the future, we got this taken care of.
Yeah, normally, I hate to throw him under the bus, but normally my crew chief, when situations aren't going good or we qualified outside the top 10, he's normally like the world's ending kind of mentality a little bit, which is nothing against him. He works really, really hard. Randall's always wanting perfection, and that's what makes him a great crew chief. So when things don't go great, he wants to, he's just not happy about it, and I understand that completely. Kind of the more happy-go-lucky, like, it's fine, we can start a lap down, whatever. We'll still go out there and win. Like, that's just the way I look at things and the positivity I try and bring. So it's kind of a good balancing act.
Yeah.
He'll be really upset when things don't go good, and I'm pretty much bulletproof in a sense when it comes to that kind of stuff. We could wreck a car in practice on the last lap. I think we actually did that at California earlier this year, and we just taped her back together and went out and ran the rest of our race.
Nice. That's really awesome to hear that, because I think a lot of people who watch the racing doesn't get that side of the story of knowing, hey man, I'm an optimistic kind of guy, while some people of our team I don't want to say pessimist, but it's a half glass empty, half glass full kind of situation that you run in. So it's cool to see that. And today you're here, and we're going to say little spoilers for everybody, but Tyler got to play NASCAR Heat 4 today. How'd you like it? What do you think?
It was a lot of fun. I've gotten to play a few of the games. I think I owned Heat Evolution, Heat 2. I don't think I had a copy of Heat 3, but I played it a lot through events, hearsay, wherever. Yep. I got to play it a lot at friends' houses and whatnot. So it was really cool to have the trucks and everything. But I was a dirt guy, so I was like really hoping for a little something different, and NASCAR Heat 4 delivered it. I was really excited for what I saw on the late model side, or how much different Eldora looks, how much more just all the little details. Everything looks really good.
Keep it up now. That was your best lap ever. Keep it up. That was your best lap ever.
At Eldora and even these other racetracks, like I was telling you a little bit earlier, outside of here, that I thought it was really, really cool that all the tracks kind of had a rescan,
Yeah.
all the seams, all the little bumps here and there. Everything's right there, and it feels like I'm inside the race car going around the racetrack. It was really cool.
Yeah, and you raced. You guys did a little bit of Bristol dirt for a little bit, and you are the winner.
Yeah.
Tyler's the champion of dirt at Bristol.
Well, I raced against Skip and Greg, and they didn't have a lot of dirt experience. None of us have raced at Bristol on the dirt. Only some of the legends into racing have, but I had a little bit of experience racing a late model growing up, so I may have a slight
little
advantage.
bit of experience, right?
Yeah, slight advantage.
And then you also raced Charlotte a little bit in your car in NASCAR Heat 4. And how did you feel about that? And I know the AI, you were like, man, I'm destroying this AI. And I think I said to you, I was like, I think they're really low.
Well, it felt like I was at Atlanta on sticker tires and everybody else was on 40-lap tires.
Yep.
But, that makes it fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of the feel of the track was, closer than I've ever felt it before, and that was really cool to see. It was really cool to see all the paint schemes of, maybe not necessarily all the full-time teams and drivers, but, Jeffrey was in there. My teammate Kaz Grall was in there. Ross Chastain's 10 cars in there, or actually, I think that's Elliott Sadler.
It is Elliott.
So there's a lot of different cool schemes. It's just really cool whenever the new game comes out and all the schemes are kind of more caught up to date in the time zone, the time area, I should say.
Time
whatever.
zone, I was like, that's awesome. I'm going to use that phrase
time
now.
area, whatever. It's all really, really cool stuff, and it's really cool to get an inside peek into the new game and see all the changes.
Very cool. And let's shift gears a little bit here. Road America, shift gears. Haha. Play on words. Don't hate me for that joke. It's a bad joke. I got a pity laugh. A pity laugh.
That was.
It was bad.
Hey, I'm not very good.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
So.
I just put it in the wall. We're gonna call it a night. But
that's another good one.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
eNASCAR Heat Pro League, RCR. Your team has a team in the Pro League, ERCR. And we talked about it a little bit, and I made the joke. I was like, Joey Stone has gone to 3 of your races, and you've won 3 of your races: Talladega, Bristol, and what was the last one? Charlotte, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is the guy your golden luck charm in the Pro League?
It seems like he is. It's always really cool to get to see him at the racetrack. Joey's always got a very high positive energy. Yes. Obviously, for those that know he was a little down in the dumps a little bit after a week or so ago. Yeah, and I hate to see that, but he's a very positive guy, and he'll bounce back from it really quickly. Whenever he comes to the racetrack, he's always just super pumped and ready to go. I honestly just need to throw him in the driver lounge with Randall whenever he gets all down in the dumps and all upset about qualifying 11th. I think Joey would do a really good job of getting him back on his feet.
Really? How much input do you have with that, or how much have you followed the Pro League side of it, just from the team's aspect of, like, are you guys, like, going into the playoffs for Daytona, where you guys got this, you can do it, Did you give him a little bit of tips or tricks? Have you helped him out in any way throughout the season?
Well, I feel like, to be very honest with you, I think he's a lot better at NASCAR Heat 3 than I am, and he was doing a much better job than I would. So I'm sure there wasn't a lot of tips or tricks that I could really lean in and help him with. But every time that we would message on Instagram or Twitter, whatever it would be, whenever he's going into a race, I try and tell him good luck. And I wouldn't really try and make it any more than that, because he knows what he's doing. He's a driver. He's got it covered. I didn't want to be, overkill, like, hey, no issues on pit road today. Make sure you don't wreck. I didn't want to be that kind of guy. Just tell him good luck. And
it'd almost be like him telling you, hey, on that 40-lap run, make sure you don't wear out that right front because you know it's going to kill you. And you're like, I know what I'm doing, bro. Go play your video game. I got this. So it's almost, I like that respect. You're like, hey, you're a pro on this side.
Don't want to overcomplicate it.
Exactly. But going to Vegas with 4 for the first round of the playoffs, what advice would you give a lot of these pro guys, even though it's a brand new game, you've played it, you've seen the tire wear model, it's a mile and a half like Charlotte, like you ran. What advice do you have for those pros that are racing for a championship in the next couple of weeks?
Well, is it three races each round?
4 races.
It's 4 races.
So it's 4 races. How it works is, for the playoff picture, if anyone wants to know, it's 4 rounds, and then each round we lose 2 drivers until the final race of the season. We'll have 4 teams racing for a championship. Right. So just kind of, as you've gone through the gauntlet yourself.
Oh, yeah.
What advice?
What makes it a little bit nicer with 4 races, well, it actually can work against you or work for you. For us on the Xfinity side, when we have 3 races, you have just very little room for error. Mm-hmm. And unless you amass a ridiculous amount of playoff points in the regular season, you just can't afford to make a costly mistake in your race. You can get away with it if you make it in Stage 3 going for the win a little bit. But if you make that mistake in the beginning of Stage 1 or Stage 2 before you collect any stage points, you can lose a lot of points really quickly in your day. So, it's kind of one of those odd balances. You never want to be on the defensive, but you always have to be keeping in the back of your mind. is it really worth this one spot or this one stage point or this one particular spot in this race over the course of this run? You just gotta balance that decision making, risk versus reward, very heavily. And for me, I was starting kind of I was in a hole to kind of begin with the playoffs, and crazy saying that because we had the one win, and I think we had one stage win, so we had 6 bonus points, but we weren't really as fast as we needed to be, so we had to had to plan out everything very accordingly. So going into the race, the first race of the playoffs, we were, all right, we need to finish here in this stage, and then we'll get back to you from there. So that's kind of the little, I guess, goals, very, very short-term goals we'd set out in front of ourselves, and we just kind of race position stage by stage and race by race, and just, all right, we need to be 7th or 8th here, and if we couldn't get there, like, all right, we need to be like 6th or 7th here now in this stage. We kind of played it like that. Now you got a lot more people working around you to help bring that all into picture. A lot of these guys, I'm sure, don't have a team of engineers back at the house.
They're their own engineers. So.
they're their own engineers, and I'm sure they have ways to keep track of that stuff. Yep. But a lot of moving parts and pieces. So you just have to be very smart and just keep in mind what your point situation is as it kind of resets throughout each round.
And just
that was a lot. Sorry.
No, man. I was
sitting there, I was like,
wow, he just blew my mind because, like, you gave the whole lesson plan for somebody to be successful. With a driver mentality, is it a short-term memory through the playoffs? Like, hey, we had a bad stage, we had a bad race, forget about it, let's move on.
You have to.
Or do you sit on it?
You can't sit on it at all because it just brings negative energy into the team, into the group. If you go into a race, I think the first round for us, we ran at Richmond. We ran, 8th and 9th. We weren't great. We went into the Roval, I believe, right after that. I think if the schedule works. And we were good. We didn't do great, but then we went into Dover like, oh, we're in a really good spot, and we had a terrible race, and we just barely made it in by a couple points. And if we would have sat on that terrible run at a place that we had a shot at winning in the spring, I mean, it's just counterproductive. You have to move on from it. You got to move on to the next race and get geared up and focused for that. So you got to have short memory. You really, I guess you have to not let the emotions get the best of you. I think it's easy, especially in a video game or a simulator, I would say, for someone to go out and wreck somebody and not really have to pay the consequences of it because they're not going to come over and hit you in the face or wreck you back after the race. I mean, you could be surprised, right? But you just got to keep in mind, like, risk versus reward, and is it worth wrecking this guy for this one spot when you can come back and wreck the rest of your playoffs at a later date once he's out of it?
Yeah. And how long, just because we use the Joey conversation because we saw how devastated he was after Daytona. Right, he was so close, and their team just didn't make it, and they were, I think, 9 points, if I remember correctly, outside that playoff window. Is when do you kind of say, you know what? Okay, I've mourned over this enough and put it away. Is it 24 hours, 48 hours later? Do you wait a couple of days, or just a couple hours later? Like, it's in a box. We're in the middle of the ocean. We got to be Jacques Cousteau to get those feelings out. We're focusing on the next couple of weeks.
It's tough, especially when that's the goal you set for yourself or for your team from. Even before the first race of the year, you go into it wanting so much, and everyone that is a part of the E League or Xfinity racing, Cup racing, whatever. Everyone wants to make the playoffs, and everyone wants to win the championship. But sometimes it's just impossible for all fall together. But you gotta forget about it. You gotta move on. The next short-term immediate goal is, well, I guess I can go out here and win as many races as I can to make the best stake for myself for next year. And the nice thing is the pressure's off of you. You're racing around guys that have a lot more to lose than you do. And honestly, you got to take that and use it to your advantage. It's a rocky road to kind of go down because, some people are like, well, you should be getting out of their way. It's their playoffs. I look at the opposite way. You're there for racing race by race, just try and win races and win for your team and your sponsors and your supporters. And that's what you're there for. And those guys are racing for something else. They just got to keep in mind that. And if they get caught up in it, battling for a win, and they're the ones that lose, it's honestly on them, not really on you.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really good point there is I talked to some of those guys after the Daytona race, and I was like, look, go be Tony Stewart. Go win 3 out of the 4 races, and then come back next season and just dominate the playoffs. Like, show people there was a reason you should have been there. So it's really cool for you to mention that because that's where a lot of that mentality comes from at that point is, all right, I didn't win, but I'm going to take your win from you. I'm going to get as many points as I can from you just to make sure it's harder for you to win that championship. So thanks for that answer, man. That's really insightful.
Yeah, I feel like the worst thing you can do, too, is if you're one of those drivers that's not in the playoffs and you get out of the way for someone that's in the playoffs to win the race, you're kind of upsetting the whole balance of of the scope of what the playoffs could be. So if you're running first and the guy behind you really needs a win to get to the next round, you get out of his way and let him go, or cut him a break here or there. You could shift the whole outlook of the points, playoff going into that final race.
And it almost that statement brought me back to Bristol with Matt D and Ryan Newman. Because everyone was like, "Oh, Ryan Newman just that's the way he drives. It's harder to pass in a kidney stone."
Right.
But if you look at it, if Matt would have won that race, it knocked Ryan out of the playoffs.
That kind of brought in a whole new perspective for me. I kind of was aware of the Clint, Ryan play at the bubble, and there's a couple drivers in that area. Suarez is back there, Jimmy. I think he's fallen out a little bit. I could be wrong. But there's a lot of drivers right in close proximity with one another. Yeah. And I was really upset at first, thinking, man, like, why did Ryan Newman mess that up for him? Why didn't he just get out of the way? But then I'm thinking, well, he's racing for his own likeness right now to get into the playoffs too. Yeah. So you just always, the first initial reaction why someone did something can honestly not tell the whole story of why something happens. Yep. And it makes a lot more sense. And, it stings for Matt. And I still wish Ryan wouldn't have done it, just for the feel-good story and all the things that Matt's been through. Yep. But that's racing. People don't get out of your way for the feel-good story. It's, if I would have, when Justin Allgaier blows the tire, the whole field isn't going to stop and let him come get a tire so he can go out and win the race. He's supposed to win the race. It's just the way things go. So it's just part of it. And, Matt's fast, and, I think he'll have a couple more opportunities for the years up.
And he's looking good, and to have that car up there at Bristol and just have that situation, it's a matter of time before he's in victory lane. So I guess the last thing to talk about here is the gauntlet. I assume, did you do some Roval? Did
the
you
gauntlet?
He hit a 120.4, I believe.
What?
That's what it's called, the gauntlet?
Yeah, the gauntlet.
I didn't know we call it the gauntlet.
Yeah, so here we call it the gauntlet for the Roval. It's my version of Top Gear's test track.
I got
But every driver that comes in, anyone who comes on the show, they take a lap around the gauntlet.
Well, shoot, I should have. Well, I did
more
than one lap, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really cool to see the new addition on the back straightaway, the revised chicane.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to really call it now. It's much more of it's even wider and more pronounced than the bus stop at Watkins Glen. You have to really stop going into that corner and get really positioned coming out of it. It's impressive.
So do you feel like you're going to be ready for it in a couple of weeks when you have to hit that from playing 4 just for a little bit? It's like, I have an idea. Or
well, it just gives me a refresher how much fun that track is. It's actually one of the few road courses that I go to that I feel like I caught on pretty quickly to. But the chicane on the backside was the one area that I was really slow at, just because I was in a spot, like I was telling you, that if I have a bad race or I wreck out, it totally shakes up my playoffs. Yeah. So that was an area of the racetrack I wanted to explore and find more speed, but risk versus reward was very huge. And now it's a little bit wider. You have a little more room to run off if you miss your mark or roll a little bit too much speed into the center of that corner. So it's really exciting. It's kind of cool that the first time I got to feel something out, or the new addition, it was actually on the game. Yeah. And I'm actually really excited to get there and race that corner in the coming weeks.
And I'll say it like this: you can probably tell me if I'm completely wrong as a professional to the layman fan here. But when I used to race just that track and that chicane, I used to race it like Daytona bus stop on the road course. You drive in as deep as you can, hit third, let it bounce and roll through the corner, and get off. Is that kind of similar how it was with the old design, or is it really you're on the brake as hard as you can, getting into second, and just kind of rolling through there?
Yeah, I feel like you had to really make sure that you didn't carry too much speed across there, because if your car slides just too much, you're in a tire barrier and your day's over. So for me, it was an area I didn't really get to push a lot in. I just had to be very conservative, but definitely some drivers could.
Wheel it through
I
there.
think in qualifying there last year, I ran third in qualifying, and I actually had 0.7 of a second up on the pole sitter. I think Austin Cindric got the pole. Coming to that chicane, or whatever it's called these days, and he was over a second faster than me in there. So that's definitely an area that I left a lot on the table, but it was a very high risk, and it's an area that isn't quite the same anymore, and hopefully I can play around with a little bit more.
Very awesome.
Greg. Oh, Greg.
So that was your lap at the Roval.
I
Holy
know.
crap! I think
Pretty
you're
crazy.
I think you're leading at this. Is he leading the boards? The producer in the back says you're leading. So you're beating Michael Levine. Actually, it's you, Jason Keffer from Junior Motorsports on the NASCAR Heat Pro League, John Wood, and Michael Levine. So our first official driver is run over on the top of the charts. So hopefully it takes over in September and you actually get a win there with this being in the lead. I don't know, man. I'm actually shocked that you came in on your first try and was like, boom, I'm the leader.
Yeah, well, it was pretty crazy. My first at speed lap was my best, and I'm sure it got recorded, but my best lap was like my first one I ever did, and then the ones after I was getting a little bit too much and running a little bit slower, so it was really cool.
Well, and earlier you're like, I don't know if I could take these guys. Well, if you're sitting on top of the charts at the Roval right now, I think you can handle some of these pros for a little bit.
Maybe at the road courses.
Maybe at the road courses.
Nowhere else I might be out to lunch.
I will honestly say some of the best racing we've seen in this series so far has been at the road courses. We did a preseason race at Sonoma, door-to-door, bumper-to-bumper in the last 3 laps, and it was a fuel mileage race on Xbox. Watkins Glen for during the season, Joey and FedEx racing for the win with a lap to go was crazy to see. Same thing on Xbox. Like, for some reason, road racing just put out the best product of what we've seen on the track so far. So I actually think it's going to be awesome to get more guys going up against you if they can knock you down in the future.
I'm sure. I'm sure those guys will figure it out. They're good.
Hey, man, they're not running setups. Everyone's running pre-built setups, so you never know. You could remain king for a while.
We'll see.
Tyler, I want to thank you for coming on the show, man. Is there any socials you want to give out there? Any kind of sponsorship? Where can people find you on the interwebs?
It's pretty. I feel like in the past they used to have some pretty interesting usernames, but pretty self-explanatory. It's Tyler Reddick. Mostly active on Instagram and Twitter, but obviously got Facebook, and I try to keep it interesting, be myself to the best that I can. But I'm not the best at it, so it's a learning process, and I try to get better every day.
I'm awful at Instagram. Don't worry. I still have yet to figure Instagram out. Twitter, I'm better at, and I've just abandoned Facebook, so don't even worry about it, man.
What? Facebook who?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's mostly for family and friends. I'm still alive. How are you? And then off on the other stuff.
Yeah.
So Tyler, man, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You have a great one, dude.
Thank you
for
very
coming
much.
on.
Appreciate it.